And hopefully this will be one of the last we do before we start doing things IRL. And I want it to be the last one because I think it's good to go out with a bang. And we've got a fantastic guest today in the shape of Hassan Akkad. And I think some people are familiar with some components of his story, but we're going to hear more today before doing a Q&A at the end. And I think some of the elements we'll cover today are Hassan's journey from Syria to the UK, and then the subsequent film, Exodus, that was his story was part of, that went on to win a BAFTA. And then his work at Whipped Cross Hospital up in Waltham Forest, and then his subsequent successful campaign for the rights of foreign workers in the NHS. And and at that point we'll probably have a look at the video and then ask him a bit about what some of the insights he's gained in terms of advocacy and campaigning, and how to get Boris to U-turn, much like Marcus Rashford also did last week. So first, I just want to embarrass him, and as a NHS worker and someone who's a guest, can you all be upstanding? We'll do a little clap. It's not Thursday. There we go.
Thank you.
There we go. I know you hate these as well, especially once the politicians started doing it. It got particularly cringe. I found it cringy from the beginning, but you know. But what were you, just before we start? I mean, how you sort of, I think the clap became, to me anyway, slightly ironic, or sort of, it was something cringy about it, and that you sort of, I've seen you sort of talked about in interviews. And what was that? Why did you feel it was so?
Well, I didn't find it cringe from the public. I thought when the public, when people started clapping, it was like an incredible act of solidarity. It was good to see everyone is engaging and supporting. I mean, with a clap, but still, it's a nice move. But I found it really cringe from politicians, from ministers and people in the government, because they are the people who essentially crippled the NHS with austerity and almost like privatized the NHS. And actually 4 or 5 months ago, one of them celebrated the fact that they couldn't pass a legislation where they can raise nurses' salaries. And then they're clapping. It's just, and then the surcharges, the NHS surcharges and the bereavement scheme. So it was very hypocritical, so cringe.
And also, posh people can't clap properly. I don't know if you've seen that.
Did you see that?
Yeah,
what are you doing?
Prince Charles, it's like all over the place. I don't know why. So I think the first, with that, to sort of kick off, it would be good if, for those who aren't aware, how. So you made the decision to leave Syria, and then did you decide immediately that the UK was your destination, or did you sort of work that out? And then can you tell us a bit about that journey?
Sure, yes. So just to give a bit of context, the population of Syria is 25 million, and 8 million Syrians have left. And the vast majority are between Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Sudan, and the Gulf. Actually, 0.5% of Syrian refugees came to Britain. So that's like less than 1%. I happen to be one of them. There are 2 routes. There's the legal route where you get resettled through the UNHCR, but it's a very long process. And there's the back door. You come here legally. And I came in 2016 when there were millions of people, not just Syrians, crossing the Aegean and the Mediterranean to get to Europe. And again, in terms of Syrians, 800,000 ended up in Germany, and the rest were in between France and the Netherlands, and Sweden took a lot, like 400,000. I made a decision, which I now kind of regret. I'll tell you later. I tell you why later, but it was mainly because when I left Syria, I left in a very bad physical and mental state. I was imprisoned and tortured, which left me with everlasting scars and like dysfunctional wrists and like PTSD and loads of traumas. So I wanted to go somewhere where I wouldn't have to struggle to kickstart my life, because back home I was quite successful. I was an English teacher, I was a photographer. I genuinely like had a really good life. So I hit rock bottom and I wanted to start again. So if I wanted to learn a new language, I want basically to integrate. It's a very long process. My friends in Germany and Sweden, it took them 3 years to like basically just be able to go to the shop on their own, and because the language is very different to Arabic. It's really hard to learn. So purely because English, and purely because I studied English literature, I know about Britain. So it felt natural that I would come here. But getting here is difficult. It's that's why the majority of refugees end up on mainland Europe because of crossing the channel and getting into ferries. It's a very deadly crossing. I tried 50 times from Calais to get here. I was in almost 50 lorries, which was a bit surreal. I have a phobia from lorries now, but then managed to get on a fake passport. Flew from Brussels on a fake passport, fake Bulgarian passport. My name was Tresho Anatoliev Trayanov, and landed in Heathrow, where I straight away claimed asylum. And there are two types of asylum: humanitarian protection or political asylum. I was granted political asylum because I have a big case and I have evidence and stuff. And yeah, I've been here for just over 4 years now, on my temporary leave to remain.
Still temporary?
Yeah, still temporary.
And what did you, just because you have sort of touched on it, what was the experience? Your friends who've gone to Germany or Sweden have had maybe a more difficult start, but do you feel like the setup that in those countries is better? Because whenever we sort of like say, it's when, it's always a sort of like, I wish we just did what Sweden did a bit more often, with everything. So what was the experience like of your friends who've gone there?
Yeah, so initially the first couple of years were very difficult to with my friends, but it wasn't that difficult for me because I know the language straight up. I could like access employment and just start over. But after that, from just having these chats with my friends who are all over Europe, they're all now like actually really enjoying it and loving it. Because they know that they could go and work in any country in the EU because the EU is great. And B, the educational systems, like my friends in Finland, for example, and Sweden, some of them have kids. They're always banging on how how great the educational systems are, and also in terms of in terms of racism, I haven't been in any situation where I was like someone was racist to me. I mean, online I get that a lot. But because I'm white passing and I live in London, but I have friends in Manchester and in Yorkshire and in Wales, and they're actually quite like struggling with it. While my friends in other European countries, like there isn't that many cases, to be honest. Like I've asked everyone, they're like, no, it's fine. Like no one, and everyone seems to be okay with it.
Mm.
So yeah, that's mainly it.
Mm. Okay, well, I mean, it's that's depressing, and for about 5 different. So it in some respects the EU passport alone is kind of like a good, it is kind of, but yeah, I guess that's sad as well. So I think, but I think going back to your journey, when did you? So you started filming. Was it entirely on your phone? You were just filming what was going on?
So yes. Yeah, so mainly the idea of filming was, I was inspired by 2 things. One is the tabloids in Britain, mainly in Britain actually, the Sun and the Daily Mail. I started reading like the tabloids and what they're saying, like cockroaches and they're taking over, and they were also like online, they're coming here to establish Sharia law, and this is a jihad this is like an undercover jihad or something. And reading these comments and reading reading these words made me feel so shocked. I wasn't upset. I was shocked because I was like, fucking hell, like these guys don't really know anything about us. because that's like Syria has never been like this whole jihad Sharia law is never like it's even new to us when ISIS came and they wanted to do all that all these atrocities in the name of the religion. So I found that there's a lot of misconceptions. There were people saying, oh, how come they have smartphones and they're like on dinghies, or how come they have these like a picture of a woman with a designer bag went viral. And I gathered that there are so many misconceptions, and people don't really understand what is it like, why people flee. We're not fleeing because we're poor. We're not coming after money. You flee because you're looking for, like, you're literally, because if you stay, you'll die. So you're looking to stay alive. It's your survival instinct. So I wanted to put a face on the crisis. I felt like I could film my journey. I had a couple of GoPros which I used, 3 power banks and like 10 memory cards, and I kicked off filming my journey. And there was also a lack of stories, because you turn on the news and you hear numbers. 200 people arrived to Greece, 400 people arrived to Greece, but yeah, who are these people? Like there was a lack of stories. And on a personal level, I filmed because, my mental health was like, it was in really bad shape, and it worked actually. The camera protected me. Like I would be on a sinking boat, or I would be in a van smuggled by the Serbian mafia. But because I had my GoPro in front of my face the whole time filming, it worked as a shield. It helped me isolate myself from the situation. And I ended up getting to Calais and had like 6 hours of rushes, and I met the filmmakers who were making that doc for BBC, and we collaborated, and the film got a lot of attention, and it was successful because it's it relies on UGC, and it relies basically, it's empowering when you give someone a phone and you say like, go film, like you're be in control of your story.
Well, I think public sentiment towards I know it's a sort of from a quite a low baseline, but I think public sentiment in the UK towards refugees has improved, and I think probably, you know, to do with your work partly, and I am sure, but I think there is a slightly better perhaps level of understanding, and you're right, that kind of why have they got phones kind of thing, and it's like, well, yeah, it's a sort of thing that the Daily Mail and the Sun talk about with homeless people as well. It's like, God, why have they got phones, and why have these poor people got flat screen TVs? It's like, well, everyone's got phones now. Yeah, it's very bizarre and disheartening. So, and then when the film came out, can you tell us a bit more about that? Because it's your story, but then there's other stories that have weaved in.
So it's basically, yes, it follows the journey of 5 people, 2 people from Aleppo, a young girl called Isra, and Anas from Aleppo, going to Germany, Sadiq from Afghanistan, Alaiji from Gambia, and I'm from Damascus. They filmed with more people, but only like 5 stories just made the final cut because it's editorially they worked together, and that was what they've done. They went to these countries and filmed with these people and gave them the smartphones, and then they basically asked them to film their journeys, and then they would pick up with them on every, like in Italy, and then maybe in France, and it's Exodus. To me, every film I work on right now, it has to be like, I like to work on films that are about social change, about important issues. And when I ended up working on the second series, I went back to Europe and I met like hundreds of volunteers who said that they are out volunteering because they watched that documentary. And it ended up my film in the series. It ended up Doc Academy. They turned it into a lesson plan, and now in British schools, if kids want to learn about migration, they can just watch my film, and there's like it's become a lesson. So that's why I'm like I'm very passionate about it. I'm very proud of it. It's because it's an educational tool. It's it's a campaign.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think you're right. And I think we'll come on to this a bit when we talk about your more recent sort of campaigning film, but the having a human face is so vital, I think, and then also
Yeah,
building the empathy between oneself and somebody from another country, and not
yeah,
having these, because yeah, as you pointed out, like that sort of cockroach language is sort of deliberately dehumanizing to kind of other people and everything. So yeah, and then in terms of your, just one last question about your journey is like the bits that maybe weren't in the film, or what, I mean, what was the most, because you were already suffering from sort of physical effects of torture, and then you had PTSD as well, and it's kind of what added to that, what were the sort of most frightening moments or the most kind of grinding moments? I mean, how would you sort of describe the sort of, yeah, what were the kind of like lowlights and highlights of it as well? Because presumably there must have been a few good, moments of levity as well.
I'll start with the lowlights. It was basically just seeing children on the journey. The boat I was on, we had 13 children on the boat under the age of 10, and it just, that killed me every time there were children around, because I was an English teacher back home, and these kids could have been in my class. And you like, for us, we were young men and like young women and some old people, but I don't think any child should have to be on a dinghy trying to cross, and then that dinghy sinking. Or no child should be stranded in a camp in Moria, for example, on Greece, or in Calais. So every time there were children around, I felt really upset, because like these I not just Syrian children, like any children, but like especially when I saw Syrian the children from Damascus, I was like, I wish, like this, I genuinely, like, all I wanted to say, like, I wish this wasn't happening. This is your childhood. You shouldn't be traveling illegally to be able to live a safe life. And the positivity basically were the acts of kindness, because I did the journey before. Remember the young boy Alan Kurdi whose
Yes.
body washed up on the shores, and that went viral and encouraged a lot of people to volunteer. We did the journey 10 days before. Like I basically arrived to Cali, and then Elan sadly died. But when we did the journey, there was hardly anyone helping. Literally, like, we arrived our second crossing, we got attacked mid-water by the Greek Marine Forces, and then we had to swim and push the boat for 7 hours until we got to Lesbos. And then we arrived, and we struggled to find drinking water. Like, we were not allowed to take taxis. We were treated like I don't know, like criminals. So someone, like a local, bought us some water, and then when we arrived to Macedonia, for example, I was leading a group of 20 people, and most of them were injured and swollen feet and headaches and fevers. And so, like, there was this pharmacist in Macedonia who gave me a huge bag full of medication for free. And then we get to Germany, where like someone also like helps us, like, drive us through Belgium to Calais, and in Calais a guy from Liverpool gives us jumpers. So all these small acts of kindness, they kept us going, and they restored our faith in humanity in a way. So this is what I would say the positivity came from, just normal people who wanted to do good shit.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I mean that. Yeah. It's sort of, and I guess you've sort of like you are helping via through your work with Help Refugees as well. Apart from
Choose love.
So, yeah. Well, I wanted to sort of now ask you a bit about. So you were I guess you were working with Help Refugees and doing other stuff, but then you decide and doing the film, of course, and then you volunteered to work at Whip's Cross, as I mentioned, and sort of what lay behind that decision, and then can you sort of tell us a bit more about it as well?
Yeah, so since I've been here, I worked mainly in TV production. I was an advisor on a Channel 4 sitcom called Home, which is basically the first comedy around a refugee story. I still work with Choose Love as a consultant and on advocacy and fundraising. I'm working with an artist called Mark Quinn on a huge art display, and it's going to raise $15 million for IRC. So all my work basically revolves around refugee organizations and advocacy and fundraising. and also like my photography. So remember a month before the pandemic hit Britain, when people were still posting memes about Wuhan, because that's how it started. Like most of, I could see stories like memes and memes and memes about the pandemic. But I back then I was so paranoid. I kind of like had a like I panicked because this isn't my first crisis, and I could sense, like I genuinely sensed that something bad was gonna happen. And then when the queues started forming outside shops, and slowly the lockdown happened, and actually Italy, when it hit Italy, that's when I was like, shit is gonna hit the fan. So I stayed at home, like basically lockdown happened, and March 25th, 26th, I started Googling how to help. I couldn't stay at home. I knew that I have to do something. And I literally Googled work for the NHS, and then there was this like a link popped up through an agency where they announced that the 5 hospitals are desperately looking for ward hosts, catering hosts, porters, and cleaners. But the most important one was the cleaner. They like that was highlighted, like mainly cleaners. And then because I was hooked to the news and reading articles, I read an article that the virus on a cruise ship survived for 2 weeks. It was abandoned, and then when they went in to check things out, they found out that the virus survived on some of the surfaces for 2 weeks. Another article: NHS staff are contracting the virus. Actually, 40% of my hospital, like of Whipps Cross staff, contracted COVID and fell ill. So cleaning and disinfecting became such a crucial job, because you need the staff, you need NHS staff to be operating in a clean environment, and you need people to basically recover and not have the virus floating around them. So I didn't hesitate. I was like, it's important. I'll do it. I applied. Straight away, I got a response. They were like, "Can you start tomorrow?" I was like, "Yeah." So I went in the next day, and it was an induction, which was done was done very badly. Everything was rushed, basically. And then like the following day, actually April 1st was my first day, and then I was assigned to disinfect a COVID-19 ward, and what they call in medical terms, it's aerosol generating procedures. So basically, the virus is airborne in that ward, and it was it was quite surreal. I mean, I cannot begin to tell you, because I am not a medical professional. I mean, and I don't like hospitals, to be honest. I try to stay away from hospitals. But when you're inside that ward, you're like wow, like this is it, basically. This is the front line, and this is what I have been reading about, and I've been like watching all these news reports about. So it was really hectic. It was quite hectic, especially during the April to like mid-May, during the peak. We had people in corridors. There wasn't, in my ward, we had 18 beds, not a single empty bed. Sadly, like a lot of people passed away. Our morgue was full up. They had to get an external morgue. It was especially difficult to see, because this pandemic changed our rituals in terms of like even death has changed, because people were dying with other loved ones around them, and you could see them saying goodbye on FaceTime and on Skype. And physically also, it was such a demanding job, because because they had to make sure that the hospital is clean all the time and disinfected. We had basically to wipe out every surface 24/7. All the hotspots. The hotspots are like the light switches, the door handles, like the sinks, everything, bed frames, tables, chairs, toilets. And then we have to take all this COVID contaminated bin and throw it outside, and which goes to the incinerator. So yeah, man, it was it was quite it's quite difficult.
But then how would you say, how was your health? Did you manage not to contract it, or did you sort of stay safe yourself? Or
I basically when I when I went for the induction, I said, listen, I don't mind. Like, if you want to put me in a COVID ward. And they were like, yeah, we're going to put you in a COVID ward. I was like, okay, that's fine. But you have to assure me that I'm going to get PPE. Because I live with my partner and I don't basically want to get the virus and take it back home. And they said, no, you'll be given PPE. And to be honest, like in my hospital, we've been given PPE all the time. Like we haven't had, there were like occasions where we had a shortage and they were like, be sensible with PPE, but we've never had a day where like we had no PPE. And I worked at the hospital for 65 days. And on my last day, I got tested and it came out negative. But my colleagues in the ward, 70% of them were positive. So I think, I managed to stay safe.
And then how would you say that, would you say that, you know, you're obviously motivated because you could see this kind of disaster rolling towards us, but and then did you feel like at the time when you made that huge decision, did you think it's going to help the standing of foreign workers and refugees or migrants to this country, or that didn't cross your mind?
That never crossed my mind, because I figured that okay, so now we're this is a pandemic. We're calling this the front line. So NHS staff, basically, they are the people on the front line. So you would assume that the government, and so the public supported in every way possible. You had people 3D printing visors and sewing scrubs and sending out food and chocolate, and the public were amazing in terms of, and also like staying home to support the NHS. But the government, like I didn't expect, to be honest, the government would basically stab people in the back, because two things that happened while I was at the hospital. It was the NHS surcharges, where basically they wanted to charge migrants who are working for the NHS £600 a year to access the NHS. So they U-turned on that, and which was, to me, like the other thing which I found unbelievable. I was like, this is actually, that's one of the reasons why I don't feel like I could live here forever in Britain, because it was something that you would expect in a dictatorship, in a totalitarian government, where they announced a bereavement scheme. They basically said that migrants who are working at hospitals, and as you know, NHS staff is like very diverse, and there's quite a lot of migrants who work for the NHS, a lot, especially in the bottom of the pyramid. So especially like the low paid jobs, cleaners, porters, healthcare assistants, and ward hosts. Mainly, to be honest, the majority are black. The majority are like black people who've migrated from Africa to Britain. So they announced a bereavement scheme saying that if you're a migrant working for the NHS and you die, your family will be given indefinite stay in the UK. And they excluded the cleaners and the porters and the ward hosts and the healthcare assistants. These are the people who actually needed the most. They're the most vulnerable. They're the working class. They're on like minimum wages, and they are the ones who want their families to be looked after if they contract COVID. And like the majority are from BAME communities, and you know, the study showed that BAME are at most risk in COVID. So all of this never added up, you know. Yeah. And then
let me, what I was going to do, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you at that point. Just say, shall I show your video at this point that you made around this?
Let me just explain the video very quickly. So I drove to the hospital, and I was walking to the hospital. I read an independent article, and they basically said, which is exposing what the government has done. And I got so upset, like literally so upset, because like I work with these people, like, and it also could affect me, because I am also a migrant, a refugee in this country. Like, and if I die, I would like my partner to stay here, you know, like to be looked after. So I was like, you know what, screw this. I went to my car, and I was like, maybe I'll tweet something. And I was like, no, I'll just record a video. So you can show the video now.
All right, I'll show it now. Thanks for teeing that up. And before I do that, I just realized I've forgotten to say, if you do want to ask Hassan any questions at any point, just use the chat, and we will do a proper sort of Q&A thing towards the end. So if you do use the chat, send some questions, and I'll read them out if they're any good. Or no, I'll read them out, and we'll come on to the. we'll watch the video now, and then we'll continue talking. But please do send in some questions for Hassan. All right, I'm going to try and share my screen. Hopefully, there's nothing embarrassing on there. Here we go. Right, so if you don't know, this is the video Hassan just talked about, which, as you can see there, it's racked up 5.1 million views. And then we'll hear a bit more about its impact shortly after.
Mr. Prime Minister, my name is Hassan Akkad, and I am proudly working as a cleaner in a hospital 10 miles away from the hospital which you were in. I joined around the same time, actually, because I wanted to help this nation overcome this pandemic. I've been really enjoying the clapping that you and your fellow ministers in the government do every week. Today, however, I felt betrayed, stabbed in the back. I felt shocked to find out that your government decided to exclude myself and my colleagues who work as cleaners and porters and social care workers who are we're all on minimum wage. You've decided to exclude us from the bereavement scheme. So if I die fighting coronavirus, my partner isn't allowed an indefinite leave to remain. This is your way of saying thank you to us. Now, I'm sending you this message hoping that you will reconsider. Because I did see a humble Boris after you were discharged from hospital. I saw a different Boris. So, us migrants are on the front line doing these very demanding jobs to help this nation overcome this pandemic. And the least you can do, if we die, to give our families indefinite leave to remain. Please reconsider. And I hope to hear back from you. Thank you.
So after you did it and you tweeted it, I mean, I guess then what happened? Did you have that kind of mad sensation where something was going very viral?
So it went absolutely viral. I was trending, and 4 hours later they U-turned. Literally 4 hours after I posted the video. But I would have to clarify that the credit isn't just me, because the unions also put their weights behind it, and I still don't know how to pronounce his name properly. Keir Starmer, is this how you say it?
Keir Starmer, yeah.
Who I think is a total legend. He also was grilling the prime minister on it, and a lot of people were tweeting. So it was a collective work, but I got the credit, but I don't like to take all the credit for this. But 4 hours later after the video, they U-turned, and Priti Patel tweeted that, yeah, we're including everyone. And it genuinely, I was in my flat, and I just hugged my Farah, my partner, and we started jumping, and it felt like I won the lottery. Literally, it was the best. I think it was literally the best I've ever felt, one of the best feelings ever, because, this will affect 150,000 people. And after that video, I started getting texts from people saying, my daughters will be safe if something happens to me because of you.
Oh, really?
And people were being like, you've basically helped my family. So, it's, I'm very proud of it.
Oh, it's amazing. And then did you, apart from kind of the, I think in a way, the credit, obviously it's not solely yours, but I think providing that kind of spearhead in a way for everyone else to kind of get behind. And I mean, what would you sort of attribute its success to? I mean, what was the sort of, why do you think it resonated so strongly?
Because it's filmed on a phone. It was raw. It's not produced. It's not lights and cameras and, hey, I'm doing another campaign film. I'm in my uniform. My NHS badge is visible. And I just watching it now, I was like, wow, I was quite disturbed. I was you could sense that I was genuinely disturbed. And I gave it context. I basically, I also addressed Boris. I wasn't shouty. I wasn't what the hell are you doing? I was like, dude, like you what are you doing? Like you've changed. I think you've changed, and you said like the NHS saved your life, and this is the least you can do. So it's the fact that it was raw, the fact that it was also coming from someone. So it's not like basically a journalist or a reporter who's talking about this matter. It's someone whose life is affected by this, and someone who's working in a hospital and doing the video on their lunch break. So all of these factors, that's why it went absolutely viral. Like even in the Middle East, man, like I cannot tell you how viral it went in the Middle East, because in the Middle East, they're like, everyone's so proud of this because like Syrian refugee like makes the government U-turn. So it's a very unusual thing to happen. But it happened because there was this momentum, campaigners, unions, journalists, people tweeting about it, posting, and then I gave it a bit of context and put a face on it, and then it worked.
And what unions were behind it as well?
So they what were they called? GWB. So one of the biggest unions actually, and they I forgot, GWB, I think.
There's Unison is one. Is that one?
Yes. Yeah. Also Unison, and even from the hospital. So on that day, I could see people like basically getting together on break and saying like, "What are we going to do about this?" Like everyone, literally everyone was on it, and similar to what Marcus, by the way, has done. Marcus, his campaign also worked because and he managed to get the government to U-turn because he also put a face on it. And he's got a relevant face, you know. It's he's lived that. He was in that position, you know, and that's why it succeeded. I was I'm quite cynical of charities and foundations sending white celebrities to Africa and like Syria, Iraq to do a campaign film. Why would you have to do that? Like get some locals who can tell you about this, you know. Get people who with a lived experience to front the campaign if you want to. Yeah,
I mean that is it, because I suppose with Marcus Rashford you had the sort of, he had not only the celebrity but he also had, as you say, the authenticity. He had the childhood that enabled him to speak to that issue so effectively, and you know, and I guess you had a celebrity as well, I guess, but of a lesser kind.
Much lesser.
But I think, but you had an equal amount of authenticity, and I think that's quite an important lesson. And I think and as you say, the tone of it was more, and because you appeared to be about to cry, or I
was holding back my tears. Yes, yeah. I was masking I was masking my shock and my anger with like trying to hold back. I didn't want to come across as someone who's like crying on. No, I don't want to be crying. I'm trying to send a message. But yes, you could see that. Like,
in a way, I find that more moving because you're like trying to hold it back. I think that's more. It's like it's but I think and then I suppose the weight of other sort of civic organisations or the unions and then charities getting involved as well is sort of I mean, it is good to see that there is a way that, you know, this government obviously makes a lot of mistakes, but it seems like they're also quite vulnerable in some way to public pressure, which is quite heartening, I think, because you know, with your example and then Marcus Rashford's one, you could see that they are they want the approval of the public, I think, you know.
They want to. But and so that, I mean, what I learned from what happened with Marcus, with my campaign, with everyone, with what happened recently, basically we should always hold them to account. People in power, always hold them to account, and we should do that because my opinion is that someone like Marcus shouldn't really have to campaign for this. These are basic stuff. Like I shouldn't have to be campaigning for people to get indefinite stay if they die fighting the pandemic. And Captain Tom, who walked in his garden to raise money for the NHS, he shouldn't really have to do that. These are the jobs of, like, this is the people who are running this country should be doing these. They are the ones who should be funding the NHS. They are the ones who should be looking after poor children who want to eat. And they are the ones who should be looking after migrants who are working on the front line. But when these gaps happen, it falls upon us, the public, to hold the government to account and get this done.
Yeah, but I think, well, I do feel, yeah, with this government, it's going to be hard to see them kind of doing the right things without being pressured. So I think what
Yeah.
you kind of, the lessons to learn from, what you've achieved is or even more sort of vital. Yeah. So and I think what we'll do is start to take some questions that have been sent in, and then I guess since but I just wanted to ask before that, since you made the video and there was the change and you've had this great response from people who were, it's improved their life and their prospects in many ways, but also what has it done for you? Because I think you were telling me earlier about book and things like this. So can you tell us a bit?
Yeah. So so on a personal level, I have been So I started working with the hospital, and then 3 weeks later, I was like, I need to start like documenting my colleagues. So I started taking their pictures and like just asking basic questions and posting those online. And they got a lot of attention. So I got even like the mayor, Sadiq Khan, sent me a letter being like, thank you for your work and for like telling your, basically shedding light on your colleagues' stories. And then I also asked the trust for access. I was like, can I, after my cleaning shifts, just film my colleagues? And so I got that as well, and I started filming in the hospital just on my phone, the usual. And I'm working now on a really big documentary about COVID. It's a global doc, and I've been meaning to write a book for 3 years now, but I was always held back by my survival guilt. But it just feels right now. So I had a lot of like publishers reaching out, and then I last like 3 days ago I signed with a good publisher, and I'm gonna write my memoir. One of my friends on Instagram just said that you should title your memoir "From Damascus to Soho House in 87 Days." Being facetious, but yeah, it's exciting. Like I'm working on 2 different projects, and continuing like fundraising and just doing all the work that I do.
Yes, well, I mean, that is good news, and we will, using our own sort of reach, we'll be happy to promote that book as much as possible, because I'm sure it's going to be.
Thank you very much.
We'll have you back.
Thanks.
So some questions here. We sort of.
I'm looking at them. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So the top one is quite a lengthy one. All right. So yeah, the question is, how does an INGO work with people with lived experience in a way that is authentic, respectful, and impactful? So yeah, how does a big organization, let's say like a big charity, if is that, how could they, as you were saying, you're saying the white celebrity approach is wrong and outdated. How can they approach a sort of getting campaigners and actual people like yourself at the front of their campaigns?
Very, very good question. And I think this can start with hiring people from these communities. So for example, if you work in Yemen, say like for example, because I'm getting now loads of emails from NGOs who are working in Yemen, and you want to do a campaign or a fundraiser for Yemen, the Yemeni community in the UK is huge. So if we get a Yemeni producer, for example, or a Yemeni fixer here, I don't know what the title is, and we can start getting the Yemeni community involved to front that campaign and talk about it from personal experience, that would always be successful. I mean, I love Ed Sheeran, but I don't think Ed Sheeran should be on a campaign when we're talking about the Gambia. I love his music. It's just, but that doesn't work anymore. It just and it's not just when it comes to NGOs. I think also this is when it comes to media. Like I got a request from a Persian company who they're making a drama about the Syrian community in Glasgow, and I replied saying, do you have any Syrians working on the production? They were like, no. I was like, that's very unfortunate. You should diversify your workforce. Not just, by the way, not just on the surface, even in the board. Get people from like, just, does that answer the question in a way?
I think so. So in a big INGO, it's not just who's on camera, it's also who's at the top of the organization as well, I suppose. And then like, or in this, if they're dealing internationally with lots of different countries, having people from those countries involved in those campaigns, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The second question, what's next for you? Will you continue campaigning and holding the government to account after this? Yes, absolutely. Already working on a campaign, like just it's brewing now. And yeah, I mean, I've got a platform now, and I'm not gonna do ads for H&M. I'm gonna, I want to be like a, I want to use my platform for good. So yes, I will be campaigning and holding the government to account after this.
Well, because you've got to, I mean, there's at least, I mean, it seems like now you've got a great voice on all sort of refugee and migrant issues, but also on healthcare and
yes,
and the NHS, and probably even you could speak to social care and those kind of things as well. You know?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. There's a question, the third question, thank you for your work. And has the government response to this crisis made you regret your decision to settle in the UK? Unfortunately, yes. And it isn't just this, it started with Brexit, to be honest. And I understand that people wanted to leave the UK, majority, but for me, it was very disappointing because it really affected me, like Brexit. And then what happened in the past 3 months, that was an icing on the cake, because I came to Britain with an idea of, oh my God, this is the center of freedom, right, and human rights and liberty. And I genuinely had the idea, but I was shocked. I was shocked because of what happened recently. And yeah, I mean, I would love to stay here. I love London, but it's basically expectations didn't align with reality, sadly.
Yeah. And do you think, well, actually, let's do these questions. I had a question sort of relating to that, but I think it was fairer to ask the next one, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Do you think that the government continue to respond to public pressure on these issues beyond the pandemic? What other methods can we use to ensure that they don't sink to the bottom after the momentum of coronavirus has passed? Very good question. So recently, like literally 4 days ago, they're going to stop paying student nurses wages. They hired them during the peak, and now they're going to stop paying them their wages. And it's very unlikely that they're going to U-turn on that, because there isn't enough pressure from the public. And this is happening because there's so much going on, you know, the news cycle. So, you know, Dominic Cumming happened, and like there was so much anger from the public, but 5 days later we had to move on because there was another big story happening. But yes, the answer to the question, we should definitely continue. But what would be effective is if we join a union. Like I'm going to do that, and because we can start getting news about campaigns and stuff from unions, and in my opinion, that will be very effective. Petitions are great. Tweeting and hashtagging is also great, but it's also about getting everyone involved, especially people with like influence socially and politically.
Well, I do think, Hassan, like one positive thing that you sort of mentioned as well is anything to do with the NHS. They're going to be quite vulnerable on, as long as there can be enough noise, because they don't look like they're betraying the NHS at this point, you know. So so it seems like there might be some, you know, positives, but so the next one, what effects has the pandemic had on refugee centres? And so, you know, we're not informed on you know, what is going on for refugees due to coronavirus.
So in the UK, it's been very, very bad. So when asylum seekers arrive here, they get sent to reception centres, and there were no measures of social distancing whatsoever. I saw pictures of like hostels in around the country, which were terrible. But it was even worse for people in camps, because while we can self-isolate here and we can like just wash our hands and have access to hand sanitizers, it's impossible to do that in a camp. But miraculously, thank God, and the camps in Greece weren't affected. The camps in Idlib also weren't that affected. Imagine in northern Syria, there are 30 ventilators for like over 3 million people. 13 ventilators, actually. So it would have been catastrophic if the pandemic like if COVID would sorry, I mean, connecting my words. Yeah,
COVID had got into the camps and spread.
Yeah.
But, and the next question sort of related to it's more about Syria. So it's from a content manager who is an Arab but not Syrian, and works for an NGO, and says Syria's entered its 10th year, and I think basically they're asking, how do we get sort of content? How would you want to get sort of Syria more attention for Syria and what's going on?
The 10th. So yes, March will be the 10th year anniversary of the Syrian uprising, which turned into a civil war. And I think it's really war. So in terms of like content, in terms of media, I think we should really go back to I think we should tell the story. I had an idea of telling Syria's story through the people who lived it. So because you had phases in Syria, you had the peaceful, you had Syria pre-2011, the peaceful uprising, the Free Syrian Army, chemical attacks, migration crisis, refugee crisis, mental health issues, and living in exile. And now, for example, the Caesar sanctions and the economic, the Caesar law and the economic sanctions. I think it's worth telling that story through people who have. You can reflect on each phase by interviewing people who've lived or have done something about this. Like, for example, Wa'ad al-Khatib, who made for Sama, could tell you about Aleppo, for example, because she's the right person to say so, or to do that. And what can we do is basically, I think we should just push for more sanctions. I know it's going to affect people in Syria, but I think it's the only way to cripple the Assads is by America's doing it. I don't see a reason why Britain shouldn't sanction Assad.
But do you think he would be able to hang on just with Russia and Iran? And
no,
I
don't think he would be able to do that.
No. Okay. All right. So that person, you can respond. I think wants you to get in touch with them.
Yeah.
And then this is we probably aren't going to have time for all the questions, but the next one is, how much do you think challenging Boris's ego played in getting a result in your video? And then Marcus Rashford seems he's developing a Trump. So yeah. So is it a challenge? Yeah. Is Boris a bit thin-skinned like Trump is, and how much is kind of playing on that sort of?
I think, in my opinion, like no matter how bad any person is, there's always like a good side in them that which you have to play, like you have to pick on, you know. Because I'm not saying that. I mean, I'm not. Like, don't quote me on this, but what I'm saying is that I am obviously. I mean, I'm not Boris's a huge fan. I'm not a fan of Boris. I like basically his policies in Syria. So, I have to be honest. What his Syria politics, unlike Corbyn, are quite solid. But the way he has been handling this is shambolic. Basically, it's been mad. And I was given an option of writing basically protesting outside Number 10. But I appeal to his humanity. There's still, like, even Trump, no matter how evil and like fascist he could become, there's still a human side, which I know also worked. I know Syrian doctors who basically had dinner with him, and they appealed to that human side, and they got him to tweet something about Idlib and to stop Russia, and he was really serious about Idlib, and he stopped Russia from bombing in Idlib. So it could work. It could work when you appeal to someone's humanity.
Okay, and then we have to make this the last one. And do you think it matters that these U-turns are about public pressure more than genuine change in ethics or political ideology?
I think the system has to change. The system is I mean, with the BLM movement and the biggest civil rights movement now in modern history, and of course the pandemic and everything, our systems are corrupt. And we need to change the system. I mean, but in the meantime, yes, we can get these systems to U-turn and like make them work as we want to work and try to fill these gaps. Grassroots people, campaigners trying to fill these gaps. But if we fundamentally want change, like fundamental change, we need to change the system. And don't tell me how, I don't know. And I would like to answer Selma, who's asking, how do I reach out? You can reach out at contact@hassanakkad.com. That's my email.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. I mean, the only the last question I'd love to ask is, do you think you'll ever get to go back to Syria?
I can't, as long as they are in power, because I'm blacklisted. Like literally, if I go back, I will be sent to prison straight away. But I mean, when it's safe to go back, I would love to go back.
Yeah. And yeah, so I hope that is achievable. Yes. Yeah. Well, I think thank you so much, Hassan.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Good and really interesting talk, and thanks everyone for joining us and for your questions. We have recorded this. Sorry, Hassan, I forgot to tell you that.
It's okay.
And if anyone's missed it and wants to have watch it, get in touch with us. And yeah, but
thank you guys.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you
Bye.
very much.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.